Welcome, everybody, to the May 20th, 2024 Battleground Council regular meeting. Please stand if you're able for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States and to the republic for one nation. Thank you, Ms. Hilly Lee. Roll, please.
Mayor McCoy.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Bowman.
Here.
Councilmember Ferrer.
Present.
Councilmember DeRozier's.
Here.
Councilmember Cortez.
Present.
Councilmember Davis.
Here.
Councilmember Overholser.
Here.
And the clerk is present. That concludes the roll.
Thank you. Next up, we have agenda approval. I just have one addition. Just like to add a little mention of the parks plan and the turkey property under the mayor's report. Or not necessarily the turkey property, but just the sports field. So if we could amend the agenda to include that, I would appreciate it.
Well, I'm sorry, could you repeat that? You're a
Just
little-
adding under the mayor's report to add just a update and an ask of council and staff regarding a land for sports field. So if we could amend the agenda and include that, I would be appreciative.
So moves. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Next up, summer reports, presentations. Washington DC trip, Deputy Mayor Bowman, you want to go ahead and start that out and I'll
Sure.
add anything if you.
So we left Tuesday morning for Washington DC, got in Tuesday afternoon and met with CMFM. Went over our legislative agenda and what we were going to be doing, meeting with our representative and our two senators, at least their offices. Wednesday, we started out and met with our representative and a really good meeting. Looks like there's some potential there. I think it was announced by her for $2 million on the 92nd Avenue pump project is one of the projects she's put forward for earmark for her 15 projects. We've heard that it is potentially going to be through the Senate also, that same project, but we're not sure yet. So we'll see where that goes. Sounds promising though. Also had the opportunity to meet with three of the different agencies there, EPA, Department of Justice, and Department of Transportation, talking about the Eaton Boulevard road project with DOT and talking about possible grants for Department of Justice for cops, hiring grants, cameras, grants, and there's quite a few out there. I think there's going to be potential for some. I know we've been successful with our SRO grant 3 years ago in 2020, and I think that one is done this year, correct? So we're done with the SRO grant, but maybe some options as we're going forward. Some of the cops hiring grants could potentially be an option for us as we're continuing to grow, to be able to use those to hire officers. And it's a good meeting there. EPA is the meeting that everybody shows up to. So when you go to EPA, you'll have 13 people in the room. Apparently people don't go see them, but it went pretty good. We were talking about some of the problems we're having with the Grace Avenue, Fish and Wildlife, that kind of stuff, and seeing if they can help us through some of that. But all in all, it was a good trip. It was a quick trip. Not a lot of sleep or time to recuperate, but we were in and out pretty quick.
All right, thank you. I think you covered it. Next up, we have the Regional Transportation Council. And it kind of dovetails actually into one thing we learned back at the DC trip. RTC is doing a second round of grants in June, 9.2 million. So I know Mark's aware of that and is on it. during our Department of Transportation meeting, they mentioned we might want to go outside RTC for Eaton. There's some additional grants and Josh was going, Joel, sorry. Joel was going to put together a report. There was way too many acronyms for me to understand which grant was where, and there's a lot of grants back there. So it was some advice they gave. So he captured that, and we'll pass that along. So, but that was pretty much it from RTC. That was a big news there. Urban County Policy Board, no report on there, which takes us to Echo and Councilmember Overholser.
Thank you, Mayor McCoy. Yeah, we met on May 14th, last Tuesday. We relooked at our charter subgroup recommendations, which basically we reviewed and approved the 2024 work plan and the calendar for the rest of the year. We reviewed and approved the expectations for our work together, air quotes there. So how to basically have a functioning meeting without too many disagreements. We went over the recommendations for ECHO members to the other groups as far as having ECHO members sit on the Community Action Advisory Board, Urban County Policy Board, and then the Continuum of Care Steering Committee. We went over the ECHO members' survey responses, which I'm proud to say Battleground was one of only a few cities to actually get that in time. So County, Vancouver, Ridgefield, and Battleground got theirs in, and they were all pretty consistent. And thank you to the staff for getting that done. And then we had a CRESA presentation on emergency management planning. And our next meeting is on June 11th, where we will have a Red Cross presentation and go over some of the review of further documents. So
That's awesome. Thank you, sir. Was there a C-Tran report? Councilmember Cortez?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. We had just some ordinary business, but of that business, I'd like to highlight that the bus rapid transit for Highway 99 reached 60% planning phase. And so we moved a motion to approve a planning contractor. And so that project's moving full steam ahead. So we have a estimated generally, when we break ground on BRT, they said about 2 years from completion. So they're thinking end of 2026, I believe, is when BRT all the way up to Highway 99, which will be the furthest north of the BRT service. And who knows, maybe someday it'll come hit Battleground. So that's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thanks, sir. And last but not least, Clark County Mosquito Control, Councilmember Davis?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Save the best for last.
Yes.
So the meeting, basically, we just talked about, we elected a new vice president. It's a current committee member, Rennie Kubik from the county. He's going to be the new vice president. They already have employees out in the field dipping in areas looking for larvae, and they have hired 4 seasonal workers. 3 are returning from last year, and they work mid-May through mid-October. The warm weather in April brought calls in, and with concerns of seeing more mosquitoes. They are seeing some activity. And so the interesting thing is they came up with a flyer that I would show you. When you make a service request, and they come out and they make a call and you're not there, they let you know that they're there, what they did, what they need to be done. And on the back is an educational thing. That was all done in-house, which was pretty impressive. So if you make a call when the mosquitoes come and you're not home, they will let you know that they were there. And basically that's it, except our next meeting is in August.
All right, thank you. Any other additional council member reports that we missed? No? Okay, next up, have a proclamation for Police Week. I know the deputy mayor is definitely an interest area of his. I think he's done more ride-alongs than probably all of us combined. So ask him to please read the proclamation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So just so council and the audience knows, this last week when we were in Washington DC was Police Week. And it's always sombering to go to the memorial and see the new officers that are added each year to that. So May 12th through May 18th, 2024, in honor of law enforcement officers in our community and communities across the nation. Whereas there are more than 800,000 law enforcement officers serving in communities across the United States, including the dedicated members of the Battle Ground Police Department. And whereas there have been numerous assaults against law enforcement officers, resulting in several injuries. And whereas since the first recorded death in 1791, more than 24,000 law enforcement officers in the United States have made the ultimate sacrifice and been killed in the line of duty. And whereas the names of these dedicated public servants are engraved on the walls of the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial in Washington, D.C. And whereas the service and sacrifice of all officers killed in the line of duty was honored during the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund's annual candlelight vigil on the evening of May 13th, 2024. And whereas May 15th is designated as Peace Officer Memorial Day in honor of the fallen officers and their families, and U.S. flags were flown at half staff. Now therefore, Troy McCoy, Mayor of the City of Battle Ground, formally designates May 12th through the 18th of 2024 as Police Week in the City of Battle Ground, Washington, and publicly salute the service of law enforcement officers in our community and communities nationwide.
And accepting is Police Lieutenant Jim Keller, and appreciate you, sir. Please pass along our best to the force. Thank you, sir. And we have a presentation on our legislative end of session report. I believe our distinguished guest is online. There she is. Hello,
Mayor
Ms. Vaughn.
McCoy, I'd like to introduce Annika Vaughn, who is presenting virtually tonight from Gordon Thomas Honeywell. Annika acts on the city's behalf with state lobbying, and she's going to give a presentation on end of session for the 2024 legislative session. So with that, we'll turn it over to Annika, and she'll share her slide deck online.
Thank you, City Manager, and thank you, Mayor. It's a pleasure to be with all of you tonight. You'll notice that Josh is not here. He's not able to join us today, but I do want to say that if you ever have questions, feel free to reach out to both of us. At the end of our presentation, I've attached our contact information as well. So I will share my screen. Can everyone see? No.
Not yet.
Let's see. Okay. I think we're good now. So today I just want to walk through, just do a quick overview of the 2024 legislative session, just the context of the session, and hit some of the major points that the legislature focused on outside of our priorities. We'll talk about the outcome of our priorities. Just, you all are aware we had a very successful session again this year. So want to give a quick moment also to thank our delegation for all of their work. And then Josh and I really want to get a head start on focusing on preparing for the next session. So we'll have a brief conversation about that at the end. And I should also mention, feel free to interrupt me at any time. I'm happy to take questions during the presentation. So this session, it was the second year of the biennium, the 60-day short session. It was a fairly typical short session. They adopted their supplemental budgets. A little over 1,500 bills were introduced. Of those bills, almost 400 of those were passed. So that's about 24% of bills that were passed into law. Josh and I, usually when we come to you, we usually say that the legislature passed about a third of bills. This year marks a little bit of a variation for them, as I'll talk about in a little bit. They discussed a lot of big issues, but didn't end up passing a lot of these policies into law this year. And that has a lot to do with the 6 initiatives that they considered. Political context continues to be the same. The Democrats have strong majorities in both chambers. Again, they considered some really big issues this session. They briefly considered raising the 1% property tax cap. They considered placing a cap on rent increases. Once again, they considered lowering the blood alcohol content percentage for driving offenses, providing an optional REIT for housing, and then again, transit-oriented development. None of those proposals passed the session. A little bit unusual in a session where they continue to have such strong majorities we've seen for the past several years. They have been able to get a lot of their big policy priorities over the finish line. The legislature considered 3 of the 6 initiatives to the legislature. They passed 3 of them. The most notable for our purposes is the initiative that expands authority for police pursuits. Implications for next year as well with these initiatives. Notably, there are 2 budget-related initiatives that could have severe impacts on the legislature's 3 budgets. The initiative that would repeal the Climate Commitment Act dollars, and then also the initiative that would repeal the capital gains tax. The legislature didn't take action on those 2 initiatives this session, but the conversations around what those budget impacts would be if those are passed into law started early. So that was certainly on the legislature's mind. I think it probably is one of the reasons that not as many bills passed this year, not as many big ideas made it through. In the supplemental budget year, they typically have less money to spend. This year is a little bit unique. There was a really large variation in budget health. The operating budget continues to be pretty robust. February forecasts were up, plus the legislature had an additional Climate Commitment Act auction in 2023, so they had some carbon money to spend in that budget as well. In total, they spent almost $72 billion in the last biennium. This year, that was another $2.1 billion additional spending in this legislative session. We've highlighted some key local government investments from the operating budget on this slide, but I want to mention that we sent a written report, I believe sometime late April, that I recommend you take a look at if you want some more detail on some items of interest to the city. Capital budget. This was much more of a normal supplemental budget compared to the operating budget. They spent $1.3 billion more out of a total budget of $10.3 billion. So that kind of shows you they spent the majority of money in the first year of the biennium. Local community projects are typically what we pay most attention to in the capital budget. That's usually what our project requests come out of. The legislature allocated $72.5 million for this category, and the average community project award was $372,000. So again, pretty typical for a supplemental budget, but I'll talk about in a minute. The city got more money than that. Transportation budget. I think you're all probably very aware that the transportation budget is pretty strapped for cash. Traditional revenues, including the gas tax, are down 8%. They did have some additional spending this year that was mostly from the Climate Commitment Act that's reserved for decarbonization projects. They also had the loss of their federal funding and then some funding from new fees in the Move Ahead Washington package. They didn't have any new highway project spending, but they made some investments in maintenance and preservation, which has been a big theme for the legislature the last several sessions. They also invested in ferries. So we had 4 capital budget requests this year and 2 operating budget requests. The last several years, we've been taking kind of a multiple project approach. That way our legislators have a menu of options basically that they can take to their budget leadership and say, hey, here are all of Battleground's priorities. If you have a little spare money somewhere in the budget, here's a smaller request. Or they can, pick their most important priority and really advance that as well. So we got money for some of our capital budget priorities, but not all of them. The Battleground Senior Center was one of them. That was a capital budget request for $300,000 for a remodel of the senior center. We were successful in receiving the total amount requested, actually a little bit more than that in this budget. We also partnered with Battleground Healthcare Clinic. That request was $400,000 for the remaining costs of their building acquisition, also fully funded in the budget this year. Those were our two main requests that we put forward and you approved in your 2024 agenda. You know, a couple weeks into session, we had your House members come back to us and say, hey, can you give us 2 additional smaller capital requests? I think there could be space for it this session. So that's what we did. We had the Florence Robeson Park and McConnell Park. The first was for $168,000 for park equipment replacement. We were successful in receiving $173,000 for that request. McConnell Park request was for drainage and ADA improvements. We were not funded in the budget, but again, that was a bonus ask that was brought forward after our agenda was approved. We also made a request for $500,000 in the capital budget for the downtown revitalization design. This was a follow-up request to the request we made for planning dollars in the 2023 session that we were successful in receiving funding for. $500,000 is a pretty large ask in a supplemental year. I think, you know, that's a possible reason why we weren't successful this session, but I think it would be welcome if we put this request forward again next year. We also had an operating budget request for, not really a request, but a change in our previous operating budget proviso from last year. When the budget was approved last year, they put all of the money in fiscal year 24. We needed that split between fiscal year 24 and 25 to make sure that the city could spend it between the 2 fiscal years, and we were successful in getting that split. Our final request was for a document management system. You know, this is culminating from the efforts that the city has put together, identifying your needs for an online document management system. And we also thought it would be a good tie-in to conversations that cities have been having for many, many years about public records requests and the cost of processing those. This year, we requested $550,000 for the purchase of this system and also for potential FTE to help scan all of the documents and upload them online. The Senate version of the budget included that funding, but unfortunately, the final operating budget stripped that funding out. That's not atypical at all. Our understanding as well is that the Senate budget overspent the House budget. They needed to cut some projects. Unfortunately, in the operating budget, usually individual community projects are the first on the chopping block for that. So outside of our priorities, the legislature has been focusing on several policy areas of interest to cities. The first one, housing. This has been probably the legislature's primary focus in the last 5 years. Again, they've basically passed a lot of their big policy goals that they've had for the last several years. So this year, not really a big focus on policy, more so focus on spending. So again, lots of money in the Housing Trust Fund, and then other allocations in the capital and operating budget for housing and homelessness services. I mentioned this before. They considered a cap on rent increases year to year. They also considered an optional REIT. They considered a Department of Housing, short-term rental tax. All of those bills advanced in the legislature but did not pass this year. Land use, again, another area of particular interest to cities that we've seen a lot of action in the last several years. Pretty light session for land use, actually, especially the city of Battleground. A lot of the bills that they didn't end up passing really don't impact you very much. The most notable, I would say, from this list, they did pass, the slide says residential parking mandate. It's not really a parking mandate. It just restricts the city from placing certain parking configurations as a requirement for development. So For example, if you said this specific development needed to have covered parking, you're not allowed to do that anymore. But again, a lot, stripped back from what we've seen for some of these parking mandates in the last several years. They also passed a co-living housing bill. This would require the city to allow co-living housing in areas that are already zoned for multifamily. And we heard from your staff, you already allow this in your multifamily housing zone. So again, not a concern for the city. A good bill that they passed is Senate Bill 6120. This is a fix to the wildland urban interface code issues that you may have been discussing as a city, or at least heard at AWC several years ago. The Department of Natural Resources adopted a WUI map, basically, that would say, in order to build in certain areas, you have to adopt these pretty restrictive fire measures. Broadly, cities and counties saw that map as over applied. This bill goes back and fixes it. It requires DNR to revise their maps and apply a less stringent standard. And then also the city can develop your own map if you'd like to do that. Another good bill, you have a 6-month comp plan update extension. That bill passed this year. So good news for your planning department as you get your comp plan update together. Finances, again, they considered but didn't pass the 1% property tax cap. AWC was supporting that. They did a big push to get that through, but just there's not the political will for that bill to make it through yet. State share revenues, we always keep an eye on those. Those continue to be untouched and whole. Finally, transportation. I mentioned earlier that they are considering several policy proposals around traffic safety. One of the proposals that made it through this session is House Bill 2384. It makes many, many changes to automatic traffic safety cameras, but most notably, the city can use those in work zones now, and you will retain all of the revenue if you do implement those automatic traffic safety cameras. So next steps, I hope you've already thanked our legislative delegation, but if you haven't, please send them a thank you. They are so responsive. They're very aware of what the city of Battle Ground needs and super tuned in to, what's going on at the city level. So that's unique. That's not every single city out there. So just want to say thanks to them if you haven't already done that. Josh and I put together a more detailed process memo for the next session. All in all, we've been really successful the last several sessions, and I think we do have a good process already, but next year is going to be a really, really big session. There's a lot of legislative retirements. I didn't mention that earlier, but there's 19 legislative retirements that have been announced. We will personally have new delegation members. 2 of your Senate members are retiring, and 2 of your House members have announced that they're going to be running for those seats. So potential House change. Well, there will be House changes, and there will be changes in our Senate delegation as well. The memo will lay this out in a lot more detail, but if we have bill requests, we'd like those ready by December 2nd to make sure we have enough time to socialize them with our legislators. And we'd also like our funding requests to be ready to go public by September 30th, which again, really aggressive timeline, but with the elections, it's just going to be really important to start those conversations with our legislators pretty early. And then session will start January 13th, and we'll hope to see you all there and, look forward to more success together. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Looks like you covered it thoroughly, Annika. Thank you so much for taking the time to update us and for the work you do for us up in Olympia.
Thanks, Mayor. Bye, everyone. Thanks for the time tonight.
And finally, under mayor's report, I wanted to, see if council would be amenable to have staff either do a change order or work with the consultant on the parks plan and add to that acquisition of land suitable for sports fields. In case, Durkee property may have some issues. We don't, there may be some concerns there, but whatever that's doing, I think a parallel path of utilizing that contractor to identify and potentially site plan just very roughly what could work where would put us in a good spot. So I was hopeful that council would be in support of that and allow staff to work with consultant on that. Any issues with that?
So, for clarification, you're gonna be wanting to use the consultant to look at other possible land use?
Other possible land that would fit a potential sports complex. Yes. Correct, whatever they in their expertise believes would work. So, we may have some latitude there and talking at the open house and with Sam. So I think that would be worthwhile effort.
Yeah, I was just gonna comment. I know most of the council's been following the planning commission park sport process. The sports ball fields, that was the preferred alternative that came out of the planning process when we were looking at different options. It was a slight favorite in terms of popularity. However, at the last PACE board meeting, planning commission meeting, there's strong opposition of putting a sports field at that location. And the consultants also wanted to ask if council is open to going with the recommendation of more of a nature-based park. And then, as our mayor suggested, they could start looking at other potential sites for a sports complex.
I can give my personal opinion. I'm not really interested in spending city dollars on a county park out there. I don't find that a judicious use of city funds. I get the concept and I agree that would be beautiful out there. But I would be more in favor of seeing if another agency, state or county, would be willing to do this. It's outside city limits and that would be my personal preference. So I'm not sure I would want the consultant to continue down that line either. Rest of
Okay.
Council.
They've been tasked with putting together some sort of design on the Durkee property, and I think they just want direction on whether it's more nature-based or sport. We already have a sports complex design, so that's in place, but I think
Okay.
If it's not the city of Battleground, then maybe another agency
They can use the plan.
could use the plans or those concepts.
Okay, Deputy Mayor Bowman?
I kind of agree with the mayor here. I don't think we should. I don't think we should be designing for another agency either. If we get rid of it, let them do their thing. We've been at this for a long time. That's how I ended up here. So since 2012, and we haven't identified any property. We haven't found any property. And this was kind of the piece. And so I hate to say, hey, go design a nature park when we don't even know if we can find other property that's suitable for sports fields, if that's the route we're going to go. And so, I would rather just have them go see what's out there, see what we can use before we have them design something that we may or may not do anything with and spend the money doing that.
Councilmember Cortez?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with the deputy mayor. I probably would not be I would not be in support of us moving forward with any planning on anything else other than a sports field. If this site location is not going to work for a sports field for whatever reason, then I would, it'd be my opinion that we look to see how we could liquidate this property or have another agency take possession of it, it's gonna do little value to the city at that point. And I certainly don't want to pay any, or don't want to use any city of Battleground taxpayer dollars to design something that we give off to another agency. So, but I am in favor of the mayor's suggestion. I'm taking a look for other pieces of suitable property for a sports field, I think. In my discussions, anecdotal discussions with neighbors and friends and people that live in the city, that is something that is sorely wanted in our community. And what I'm referring to wanted sports fields, multi-use sports fields. So, thank you.
Thanks, sir. Councilmember Overholser?
Yeah, not to piggyback on everybody else, but I couldn't agree more. The use of taxpayer dollars to create another plan that we might not even implement or use doesn't really make sense. So we've already spent the money to drop
Is your mic
content.
on? I can't hear
Can
you.
you hear me? Can everybody else? Yeah, it makes sense to me to look at other options for this property as far as who might want to take that on county-wise. And question, Sam, if we did have them draw up a plan for the nature park, would that cost us additional funds? Or are we already into it for a certain amount, so it's kind of included with the package?
It wouldn't cost any additional funds. It could just mean they spend their efforts in looking at other sites for ball fields.
Okay, so in that,
I think what they probably would do is study the parking need for a nature park and some other things like that. But I mean, the illustration on the screen right now shows they've already done some work in
Yeah.
terms of just concept plans of what something like that could look like. But I could direct them to put their efforts elsewhere. And
yeah, I agree with Mayor McCoy on that. We could start looking at other potential property for the multi-use recreational facility, as Chris would call it. And maybe what we already have might be a good handoff to give to somebody who might want to take this property on and utilize the plans already kind of put in place. So that's all I have.
Councilmember Farrer?
Yeah, I agree that we should look at other potential properties. I hate the idea of just giving off this Durkee property since it's already been donated. I know we did consultation, not me personally, but the board prior, back in, what was it, 22? You guys did consultation. I'm just curious. I can't remember right off bat, but that's something to look into later. We don't have to discuss that right now. But so yeah, I'm in favor of looking at other potential properties.
Councilmember DeRochers?
So I just have two things. Whose property is it? It's the city battlegrounds, correct?
Mhm.
So any money we put into it would be a city property. It may not be within the city limits, but we wouldn't be gifting our funds to somebody else, correct? Okay. And then, just for the sake of it, can you give us a little bit of history on how we obtained this property?
I could give a little history. Councilmember Bowman may have additional insight. The Durkees gifted their property to the county with the intention of having a park at that location with the family name associated with it. I can't explain. I don't know the details of how the property was transferred from the county to the city, but the city did acquire it. I think the intention was to honestly look at a potential sports fields. I know there was some drawings done internally of what may happen. And then I think at that point there was the Great Recession and there wasn't a whole lot happening. It just kind of sat for a number of years.
I believe DNR held that property.
Is that right?
Different one?
That was.
Oh, the water
That
tower.
was down. Well, we had a different.
Oh, yeah, there's that. Okay, same area.
Let's not get too far into the weeds on it. Councilmember Davis?
Well, I guess it's direction, so I'll go in agreement that I'm in favor of moving our focus to finding another location, but I am also not in favor of spending much more time on this if it's not going to benefit us.
And Deputy Mayor Bowman?
Thank you. I'll just give you a little bit more history on that. So when we had the Remy property and the bond didn't pass, we were looking for property to be able to put a sporting complex on. The county came to us with the Durkee property. It was set aside for parks. The county was trying to use it for some sort of a mitigation bank. And they planted a whole bunch of trees up there and we're hand watering them because they didn't have any water. And it didn't, I think Ecology said, you're not going to use this as a mitigation bank. And so the county wanted out of it and reached out to the city at the time. There was 2 different properties the county was looking at potentially us using for a sporting complex, the Durkee property and Daybreak Park. Down on Daybreak, they have like 200 acres down there in the bottoms. And so the Durkee property was closer to town. City ended up with it. And at the time when our former parks director was here, did a design of what the ball fields would look like. But this was coming out of the recession and was not a lot of money or anything to even hire consultants to do this. So that's why it's been there. It's sat there. It's outside the city limits, yes, but that's how we ended up with it.
Sure. And finally, Councilmember DeRochers?
Yeah, sorry, one more thing. So I am really interested in it being a nature pathway, but I'm wondering if there's another way we can go about it, like connecting with some conservation groups, a conservation district, doing something similar to Casey Center with the botanical gardens. I don't know if we can own it and then allow another organization to maintain it and use it for educational purposes. Because I would really like to have that, but obviously not pay for it, so.
I can talk to you more on the side. I did meet with a lady who walked me. I went to the Durkee property, met them, and another lady who walked me around the site. And she's very hands-on. She's been talking to Boy Scouts. She's been talking to the Lions Club. And she's even found people that will donate ways to put a gradient. No, we'd pay for the gradient, but they would put a parking lot in. She's worked with organizations that would put the path in for us and then even maintain it. So if we did the nature, I think it would be very low, price for us.
For this exercise though,
Yeah,
we're just,
exactly. I
all we
just
want is the consultant to
Move forward
just give
on this.
direction. Let's hold off on opening up another
Well, okay.
another door.
Can I just say that I am interested in the sports field, but also I don't want to give up on the idea of a
Okay.
nature
But
path.
all we're given direction on is to go look for land. Okay. I figured we might as well use the consultant while we're paying for him in a way that benefits us more judiciously. So next up, we have citizens communications, and part of the reason for doing that was I imagine we might have some people here in regards to that. So I thought maybe if we got that off the table, maybe that would soothe some angst. I will now open the meeting for citizens communications. Individuals are limited to 3 minutes. Do we have anybody who's not speaking on for the public hearing? Is there anybody here just for citizens comments? Okay, then I won't read the whole spiel.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So is there anybody on Zoom?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Well, then we will close citizens communications and we'll move on to consent agenda.
Second.
The motion is second. Any discussion on consent agenda? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Consent agenda passes unanimously. Okay, next up, we have the public hearing. Just want to give well, first we're going to have a presentation, then we'll open the public hearing. I want to set just some ground rules for council. There will not be any action or any motions taken. This is a listening exercise for us. This is a way for us to get information, to hear concerns, to hear hopes, whatever it may be. This is not a time where a motion or action will be taken and any motion would be found out of order. So with that, I'll pass it over. We have, as you may know, we do have Ken Harper here. He's our acting city attorney with a land use focus. But Mr. Crummett, I believe, is opening us up.
Sure. Good evening, council, interested citizens. I want to start the presentation by inviting our consultant Marty Snell from McKay and Esposito to, in a sense, summarize and report out on the work of the Air Park Steering Committee. As you recall, we were directed to do an air park study in reference to some zoning changes proposed on the Lawson property. The committees met 2 or 3 times, and Marty's going to report on that process.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. For the record, Marty Snell, and I work for McKay Esposito based in Vancouver, Washington. As Sam mentioned, we were asked to convene a meeting of a stakeholder group, and I'm just going to kind of report out what that entailed. So the city did convene the Cedars North Air Park Stakeholder Committee, consisting of area property owners, the Planning Commission, business interests, aviation interests, including local interests, and then Washington State DOT Aviation, and then folks from the city, including city staff. The Air Park Committee was charged to do a number of things. First, to review materials that were provided to them. Secondly, to consider the guidance materials from Washington State DOT Aviation, which is the compatibility of land use schemes. To consider previous land use alternative discussions. To consider possible near-term and long-term land use changes, that is to say, envision the area in 5, 10, and possibly 20 years out. And then lastly, to engage in a dialogue among the committee members to determine if there was any room for compromise in terms of land use changes on the Air Park District properties. The committee was asked to work under a consensus-based model, which is to say that any possible compromise would be something that people could live with, but they wouldn't get 100% of what they wanted. The first meeting was held in January after introductions with all the participants and an overview of the comp plan update. The committee members had a very good conversation about the properties in and around the air park. There was some honest dialogue between all parties, and there seemed to be some interest in coming up with a compromise for future land use plans. City staff reiterated its position in a higher and better use of some of the property around the air park while continuing to see the air park operate. The meeting convened with an invite to a second meeting in February, where alternative plans would be modeled so that participants could visualize what kinds of changes would occur with different zoning. At the second meeting, the 3 alternative plans were shared, and Sam's going to, I believe, pull some things up here. One was with no change, showing a 10-lot subdivision with 2.5-acre lots. One was a change to R3, and one was a change to R3 with some light industrial or west side employment on the land adjacent to Eaton Boulevard. The latter 2 alternatives were accompanied with development examples. The committee members spent the balance of the meeting discussing the pros and cons of these alternatives. A majority of the property owners discussed the cons and dense development as having an adverse impact on the air park. After this discussion, the interest in compromise dissipated, and most of the committee members were comfortable with moving forward on a status quo basis. Some thought there was already compromise from going 5 acres down to 2.5. Staff closed the meeting by thanking the committee members for their participation, and that their recommendation would be moved forward to the Planning Commission, leaving the zoning as is. From my perspective through these 2 meetings, I'll give you a couple key takeaways, issues. One, that the city is considering this area and the Air Park District as part of its 2025 comp plan update. Secondly, there is some confusion, rightfully so, about the status of the air park. In other words, what is it exactly? The air park is privately owned, but accessible to the public. It seems to be that the airport is kind of in between, with Cedars North listed on some FAA list, but not listed on WDOT's aviation of a list of 138 general or commercial airports. The properties in question are subject to CCNRs for which the city does not enforce said private instruments. The city is treating the air park as a general aviation airport since they are considering the land use compatibility guidance from WashDOT Aviation. Per the statute 3670-547, WSDOT does not have any regulatory authority over land use decisions. However, they offer technical assistance programs to help cities, towns, and counties evaluate aviation issues. The same statute refers to WDOT's role as one of an advocate. The city has sole responsibility for local land use decisions under growth management and can factor in all manner of guidance when it comes to zoning and the compatibility of those various land use regulations regarding the airport, operation of the airport. And obviously, the city has not made any decisions regarding this issue as of this hearing date. That's all that I have, and I know Sam's got more to share.
Thank you for that summary, Marty. That was helpful. I think I'll take you through the specific alternatives that were brought before the Planning Commission for consideration. The goal of this exercise again was we have some policies in our comprehensive plan about protecting the air park, looking at compatibility. State law also charges us to do this. So the work of the Air Park Steering Committee, while its goal was to try to achieve some consensus, a plan that might work for all parties, we haven't come to that point. So we do have a few options in play. The first option is no change. This clearly is the majority opinion among the property owners. The property would stay the air park would stay status quo at 2.5 acre lot sizes. And then the second option was to go in the direction of the city's R3 district. And this was the option that the Planning Commission chose. They made a recommendation, not a decision, just a recommendation to proceed with an R3 zoning and comp plan designation. And again, neither the council nor Planning Commission are looking at any kind of platting. This slide is just shown to see what potential lot sizes might look like, or what a hypothetical subdivision might look like under whether it's R3, or if, for example, the density in the air park district went down to 3 lots or 3 units per acre. And again, from the beginning, the city's seen this area as potentially good land to designate for some kind of an employment use. We thought maybe a compromise of potentially having the employment designations along Eaton Boulevard and then north of the airstrip might be a good compromise, and leave the land south of the airstrip to residential, whether that's just air park 2.5 acre lot sizes, or if the committee wanted to go to R3. So that's a summary of kind of the decision making I should say the discussion that's happened up to this point in time. The goal this evening, I am hoping, would be just to hear from not only people in the air park, but also other interested citizens, to take in that public testimony. The packet's close to 2 inches thick now, so there's a lot of material. And I think really to kind of absorb and think about the testimony, the material at this point in time. At a future council meeting, staff will seek some direction from council as to what direction to go. Whatever that is, we'd then come back to you with new material, or do further research, or have something where there'd be further opportunity for the public to comment on whatever the council decides to do. That's all I have. You're welcome to open up the public hearing.
Any questions for Sam before I open up public hearing? Okay, I will now open the public hearing at 7:55 PM for public testimony. Individuals are limited to 3 minutes to provide comment on the Air Park Land Use Compatibility Study findings. I would ask everybody to please respect each speaker. Please refrain from clapping, from shouting, whatever it may be. That can influence people's willingness to come up and speak. So please be respectful of your neighbor. Let's listen to everybody, and we will go ahead and start. So I do have some signed up as well. So, but when you do come up, please state your name. Please state where you live, and please state your interest. And we will get a 3-minute timer, and the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. My name is William Hewitt. I'm the applicant to change the use on the 27.5 acres from a pasture to a more intensive use. We're about 17 months in the process now. The Planning Commission voted 4-0 to move to R3. And I think they're following Battlegrounds Comprehensive Housing Plan, which shows a need for housing in the area. The property is encumbered by a set of covenants that was put on the property by the Bloomquist family, I believe in 1995 or 96. Those covenants and restrictions prohibit industrial uses, retail, commercial uses, and home occupations on all the Air Park property, including the homes that are there today. So the alternative one, which is the 2.5 acres, is permitted within the Air Park zone. It kind of challenges the council to meet the requirements under Growth Management Act. But should you decide that those 2.5 acre rural lots are what you want, please consider instructing staff that since sewer is not readily, public sewer is not readily available, it's more than 500 feet from the site, that septic tanks can be used on the property. As you know, septic tanks are monitored by the health department, and they have an added benefit of taking the water and recharging it back to the aquifer. The other alternative, which is the R3, that's, as you well know, those average lots are about 8,500 square feet. And it would include the improvement to Eaton and public sewer and public water. The last option, which is a combination of industrial and that, again, it's prohibited by the covenants. Covenants are kind of loosely enforced, but they are covenants and restrictions on the land. And so if you decide that you are going to move to the industrial zone on the property, it will probably constitute a taking because the applicant cannot change the covenants and restrictions, and the industrial zone means the property could not be used for anything. So I will be available for questions or take any questions from the council.
I don't foresee any questions up here. Okay, thanks, sir. I have a Kathy McAleer. Help me out.
Hi, my name is Kathy McAleer. I'm a resident at Cedars North Air Park, 2414 Southeast 17th Avenue. So whenever faced with a high energy issue, which I think this is, in light of everybody that's here today, I always ask myself, what is the problem we're trying to solve? And in this case, we have a public use airport that is protected by state session laws. And I'm sure you've all seen the letter sent by the DOT and approved by the State Attorney General that was delivered on May 17th, and then I understand was updated today. The letter confirms there's no question whether or not the Cedars North Air Park is in fact public use. It is public use and subject to RCW 3670-5471. And the city is required to consider compatible use. The Cedars North Air Park owners are not in favor of the R3 zoning and would request the council to maintain Air Park zoning with a potential update to allow light industrial with appropriate restrictions. I will now review a few pertinent facts. The Cedars North Air Park is public use and subject to the session laws. I believe there's been a misunderstanding regarding the classification of the airport, just due to the council report that was just given. to what I believe is an erroneous action related to the R3 zoning change approved by the Planning Commission, and if passed, could result in a violation of the Growth Management Act. The preferred alternative as recommended by the Land Use Master Plan study was light industrial, yet the Planning Commission decided to change it to R3, which we can only assume was made without all the facts. So assuming a correction is made and there's compliance zoning, any development would be subject to the CCNR, which brings me to the second point. There is a valid settlement agreement filed with Clark County Superior Court related to the CCNRs that is material in this case. It was filed by the Bloomquist and it was related to the public classification of the airport, and I've submitted it to the clerk with the case number for research. The agreement has been entered. Please note that this agreement took place in 2002, but it's still valid. There's severability clauses and contract binding clauses, which stipulate the agreement applies to all heirs and successors to this property. The last issue is just related in general to legislative process, governance, and ex parte communications, and I don't have time to go through all that today, but I would just say we should refer to the Battleground Governance Coordination Manual, which I guess now is going to be updated today. So in conclusion, we would request that the R3 zoning decision be reviewed by the city for compliance with the state regulations and reversed, and that no change be made that eliminates the air park zone. Rather, the city considers updates to the air park zone that have compatible use. So in other words, you can keep it the airport zone, you can change the airport zone to allow for potentially light industrial, and then work through the CCNRs with the appropriate guidelines that make it acceptable to everybody. So that would be my recommendation for compromise. Thank you.
Thank you for keeping time. Next up, Carol Dronin.
Good evening.
Can you please state
My
that?
name is Carol Dronin, and I'm a resident of Cedars North Air Park. We moved and built our dream home there 6 years ago, partly because of the openness, and soon realized that we had the best seat in the area for watching planes come and go from the airstrip. There are several planes that take off and land at this airstrip every day of the week, weather permitting, as well as instructional planes, up and coming pilots in training. We enjoy watching them. We built our home in accordance with the FAA restrictions as to distance from airstrip and height of our building. Not only are we concerned about the city zoning this air park out of existence, but about the addition of automobile traffic on Eaton Boulevard due to the 160 plus some homes having been built on the acreage south of the air park, 13 acres to be developed to the southwest of the air park, and the 4 acres recently zoned R10 across from the school and church close to Highway 503. The traffic situation will be unsurmountable. There's a plan to widen Eaton Boulevard to accommodate this extra traffic. After all is reviewed in regards to the rezoning of Cedars North Air Park, along with the recent addition of information pertaining to incompatibility, I would think the city should sit down and thoroughly rethink their decision in the rezoning of this air park. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Stuart Davis. Appreciate everybody keeping time and being respectful. Really do appreciate it. Thank you.
Evening, Council. My name's Stuart Davis. I'm a resident of the air park as well as airport manager. I'd just like to talk a little bit about the value of the air park and what this air park represents to aviation in general. We have many people here in the audience tonight that not only represent past, present, but also future pilots as well. There's very few of these airports left. They do have a value, even though they don't generate a lot of tax dollars. They have a value for the community that maybe not be obvious, which I, at this point, would invite each and every one of you to come out and get a personal tour and see eyes on of what this whole zoning change is all about and how it could actually damage the environment of the airport by the zoning and the following development. It does have a value because we interact with federal and state agencies as well. FEMA, we're on the registry of airports in case there was a disaster in the area. Life Flight, we're a chartered airport, so they know we're here, suitable for day and night operations since they have the capability to, with night vision, to come in here and actually use the airport as well for their emergencies. The military, we've hosted them a couple of times. They've come in with their Black Hawk helicopters and done medevac training, and which was pretty interesting. We've had commercial helicopters coming through here. Not to mention dozens of transient pilots. Typically, they will call in to the number that's listed in the airport directory. They'll get my house directly. I'll either take the call or call them back and give them a safety brief on how to safely enter an airport that they've never been to before. Offer my property for transient parking for either business or personal reasons in the area. So we are a friendly hosting airport around here. On top of that, we're interfacing with schools and agencies as well. I have many students here from the local Cascadia Tech Academy, the aviation department, that are coming out, and they're up and coming young aviators as well. In conclusion, I'd like to talk about the safety, meaning that residential areas and safe operations are not conducive to go together for that reason, for high density housing as well. So if there's any questions, but feel free to come by the airport anytime and you can get a tour yourself. Thank you.
Appreciate it, sir. Thank you again. Next up, Debbie Lebanon.
Hi, Debbie Lebanon, 1906 Southeast 25th Street. Our family owns a combined 23 acres in the air park. So I'm speaking for my mom as well, who lives next door to us. So I'm here to express my concern about the legislative process for both impacted party notifications and the overall process requirements for GMA updates. First off, the notice published in the Reflector details the county council rescheduled public hearing. It is unclear as to when the original hearing may have been scheduled and under what land use application. The Lawson zone change A to R7 site-specific request was heard by the Planning Commission on October 25th. That would be for 2 Lawson lots for 27 acres. The public notice mailed to landowners did not reference a case file number and type of land use decision as required by code and could be cause for the confusion. Is this the land use decision that is being carried forward to the council in tonight's rescheduled public hearing with the May 8th Planning Commission recommendation? According to legislative history in tonight's staff report, it might be. However, the landowners owning the other 10 parcels in the airport have never received any notice of proposed comp plan updates or zone changes potentially affecting their land. The only change on the Planning Commission docket were the 2 Lawson lots totaling 27 acres. However, the recommendation of the Planning Commission on the May 8th public hearing was to rezone the entire air park to UL, not just the 27 acres. Please keep in mind, no notice was given to affected landowners as required in the procedures outlined in Chapter 17-200. I would also like to inquire why the proposed 10-year update to the comp plan is being accelerated outside the normal timeline of the GMA update, which has a due date listed as December 31st, 2025. Whereas yearly updates are limited to no more than once a calendar year. If this change is approved now as a singular allowed docket amendment, it precludes additional updates from other landowners within the city to be considered for the remainder of the year. If this is included as a late 2023 update, has the April deadline passed to be included in a singular update that has already possibly occurred in 2023? Is tonight's public hearing an amendment for a site-specific comp plan zone change for the 2023 docket or a function of the 10-year periodic review update process? Once again, I would question the accelerated process being pushed forward for a December 2025 deadline. In conclusion, I would ask that there be transparency and verification that policies and procedures have been and are being followed relating to all submitted applications of comp plan updates and zone changes within the air park zone. Thank you.
Thank you. Last form I have signed up is Jack Meckler.
Good evening to the city council. My name
Yep.
is Jack Maxler. Sorry, I'm a little quiet. My name is Jack Maxler. I am a resident of the Battleground Air Park. I live on Southeast 17th Avenue along with my parents. I am wearing the uniform today, represents the Battleground High School AFGRTC, along with maybe 10 or so aviators that are all interested. I've talked to them a lot about flying on this air park and all they like to do. I am the group commander of our corps, so I speak for them on their behalf. And we are all just being an Air Force unit, we like to really get into aviation. We learn a lot about aviation in our studies. And I am personally an interested aviator. I fly with my parents all the time. I'm going to Embry-Riddle in Daytona, Florida to get my pilot's license this summer. And doing so, I would like to keep this air park open so I can have somewhere to fly. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Are there any other members of the public that would wish to provide testimony regarding the air park land use compatibility study findings? If you would, please come state your name, your location, and your interest, please.
Good evening, council. For the record, my name is Joel Sterling. I am an engineer for Sterling Design Incorporated. We prepared several of the exhibits that Mr. Crummett showed up on there for the 27 acres, the Lawson property. And I was part of the Air Park Steering Committee. We had some lively discussions. I know there's a lot of emotions and history with the property. The only reason I'm up here is I want to make sure it's clear our intent was not to close down the airport with development of the Lawson property. We have maintained the runway and the easement on all the designs that we did. Our intent was to keep that runway in place. So I just wanted to be clear that what's on the table, the change in zoning that Planning Commission recommended to R3, just because the air park zone is removed doesn't mean that the airport itself is removed. So those easements, the runway, all of those processes remain. There is the question of compatibility, which was discussed. That is something that City of Battleground staff would take into consideration with the land use application for any of the properties that are within the area if it's all rezoned. So that's all I had to say is I just wanted it to be clear, development of the property doesn't mean the airport's gone. It's not we're closing down the airport or we want it to be closed down. We are just simply looking for options for the property owner, Lawson, of those properties and trying to reach a compromise, something that fits with the city plans, the long use or the overall residential goals for the city. That's really the point of why we're here today. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. Madam Clerk, do we have anybody on Zoom to testify?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, sorry, sorry, sir, didn't see you comment up there.
Council. My name is Barry Munster Tiger. I'm a Vancouver resident. I'm the flyout chair for the Washington Pilots Association, member of the Camas Wash Eagle Aviation Association. I've flown into Cedars a number of times. It is a critical resource for those of us that are doing off-airport landings to have a facility like this for any emergency practices. I'm trying to get a million things through my head at the same time, so that's why there's a little bit of trepidation in my voice. I know there's a lot of others that have words that they would like to say. I'm trying to get them to come up and speak as well, so I'm trying to encourage others at the same time. I know that the previous gentleman mentioned that he was respectful for maintaining the runway itself, but at the same time, that's not long-term sustainability, especially when you're putting residents so close to an air park that they have no interest in or affiliation to. It's just putting a stake in the ground for later to be canceled. They're most likely going to complain about this at a future date, come back to you with other complaints being that close to an airstrip that they have no affiliation to or understanding of how it operates. So it's not sustainable to put this density that close in proximity to something that has that amount of activity. So I encourage you all to visit the airport from above or on the ground and see how important this is to the local community. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Looks like you encouraged somebody to come forward.
Yeah, thank you, Barry. I'm Jason Nemiroff. I'm a flight instructor in Camas, and I'm the president of the Camas-Washougal Aviation Association down there. And I just want to give my perspective as a flight instructing professional that, for one, I don't know if non-pilots know this about this area, but this is a very dense training area that we serve the greater Portland metropolitan area. So Portland, Troutdale, Vancouver, Camas, Washougal, La Center, all these people, there's a lot of people that want flight training. We're required to do soft field landing practice. That means non-paved surfaces. It's required for private pilots and commercial pilots and flight instructor applicants. And there are not a lot of options for places that we can do that safely. Cedars North is by far the best maintained soft field that we have in the area, and it's one of the safest. I really want to reinforce what Stu said and what Barry said, that as residential areas encroach on the airport environment, even if the runway surface remains intact, it starts to become unsafe. There's an airport in East Vancouver that's called Fly for Fun. It's a great airport, really fun, but the houses are too close, and we do not like to do our soft field practice at Fly for Fun because the risk to us and to the non-flying public is too significant. Cedars is really nice in that it has a lot of area around the airport environment where, in the unlikely event that something bad happened, we don't just go flying into someone's house, and that goes a long way. Flight training is important for us. You know, I mean, we all like commercial air travel. We need to have flight schools, and we need to have airports for those flight students to get to. I got several flight students here of mine in the audience. That guy right there did his first solo at Cedars North. It's a really special airport. It's really impactful for what we do. And Barry is totally right that as residential encroaches on it, it just sets up issues down the line, that people buy a house near an airport and then get upset when there are a lot of airplanes there. And I totally get it, because the airplanes are annoying, but again, we need it. I mean, you want commercial air travel. You know, you like it when Amazon delivers your packages quickly. We got to make pilots somewhere, and this is part of how we do it. I have the same concerns about light industrial encroaching, that a field is really nice, especially when you're training students that are learning how to fly these planes. You would rather have open space around them for their safety and for the safety of the community. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Coming up the last call here.
Another McAleer. There's three of us. So I am a retired Alaska Airlines pilot and also a current flight instructor. The area to play to his conversation, there's only 3 grass strips in Clark County. If you get rid of this one, that's 33%. And all of them are privately held but public use. So that includes Goheen, it includes Daybreak and our strip. Super important. That's all I got.
Thanks, sir. I saw somebody else. There we go.
Hi, I'm Kathy Brown. I'm 20609 Northeast 159th Avenue, across from the airstrip. We've been out here since 1996. And I really can't speak directly to the air park in itself, other than I've enjoyed it for all of these years. What I can say is I am so concerned about the urban growth, the traffic, and the safety issues. And we've heard a lot of safety issues tonight about the air park and so forth, but the traffic is concerning me greatly. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Devin McMahon. I am not nearly as impressive as many of these folks up here. My pedigree in the aviation community is much less impressive, but as a non-resident of the air park, I just wanted to make sure that it was understood how important it is to the community at large. I've grown up in in Battleground. Been here over 30 years. I'm very excited to be sharing a lot of the same beautiful places that I've enjoyed with my 4 kids, you know, Battleground Lake and Louisville Park and Kiwanis and all these amazing public spaces. And so when I recently started being able to do some aviation out of Cedars North, I was just overwhelmed by the hospitality and the warmth that came from this community and the encouragement. As you know, I start looking down the path to get my private pilot's license and trying a little bit of paragliding and other aviation sports. These guys are awesome. And I get very concerned. I don't want to sound like a broken record here, but when we start talking about, you know, that development coming in around the air park, I've heard from plenty of other people that have been in situations very similar to this. They set up, you know, an established air park, which from what I understand is a very difficult thing to do. I don't think they're making any more of them anytime soon. You get an established air park and then you start putting in these big subdivisions around it, and it doesn't take long for people to start complaining. And before long, it's the air park that has to go, not the people who are feeling offended by that. So I get very concerned. I'm very excited to be able to share it once again with my kids, and I see the people it affects and the community that it impacts, and just really want to make sure that a lot of consideration is put into this before decisions made. And that's all I have.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate everybody being respectful. Much appreciated.
Hi, my name is Don Lasher. I'm a resident of the Cedars Landing area. I've been there about 2 years, and I want to echo one of the concerns, and that is infrastructure, roads, and travel. Having been there for 2 years, there are definitely times of the day where you can come out to try to make it to the 503, which is the primary way in and out of this area. And there are times if you come out at the wrong time of day, it can take you 20 minutes to make it from that airfield location out to the 503. It can be a combination of school buses, construction, traffic. And it feels like that area right there is the wrong place to be adding more high density housing right now until some of that infrastructure is upgraded. So, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thought I saw somebody else. Okay. No, oh. You can queue up too. You can just, yeah.
My name's Chris Prentice. I'm a pilot, certified flight instructor as well. I live off of Cedars North, fly in and out on a regular basis, fly to work. I got into general aviation 20 years ago, and the airstrip was around then. So there's very few grass strips left in this county. And as a flight instructor, as you just heard, we do a lot of off-airport type stop field landings, things like that. The airstrip's very well maintained. It brings in a lot of flight school traffic from upcoming aviators. So we have traffic coming in from Kelso, Scappoose, Aurora, Troutdale, Vancouver, Camas. All flight schools use it. It's a great place for technical training and things like that. You know, the other thing too is it brings in travelers who can also come to the city. It's actually a public airstrip. So general aviation travel, you probably don't know. It's actually used quite frequently. I fly all over the country in my planes. It's an efficient way to travel. It brings in people. If anything, I would add to the infrastructure of it, if you are to build on it, and make it more public inviting, so you can bring more people into the city. But I definitely would not get rid of it. It's one of 3-4 strips left that are grass, one of which you serve was Fly for Fun. Unfortunately, that strip will be going away soon. It's going to be donated to the Vancouver Trust, and it'll be a neighborhood as well. So trying to keep some sort of general aviation, some of these air park communities, which are very slim nowadays, there's only one in this whole county that will probably remain, and that's Parkside. Doing the best to keep some sort of general aviation and battleground would be great. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. Please let us know who you are.
My name is Austin Shea. I'm a Portland, Oregon resident. I actually just got up to drag him up here. I didn't realize he could actually get up, but anyways, I actually work for a major airline. It's my day off if you can't tell, just in case. So, but I've done all of my flight training up in the Northwest. It's actually started flying in Pearson Airfield, and I did all of everything that I learned pretty much, with few exceptions, is in the whole Vancouver area. And one of the things that makes really great pilots is, like others have talked about, these grass fields and having good small airstrips for pilots to come into. And at the end of the day, what makes really good airline pilots is having those fundamentals, those foundations. So kind of mirrored what another gentleman said. When you have an airstrip and you start building houses all around it, it starts off, no big deal. People sign waivers, there's noise, no big deal. But then eventually people say, we want to close the airstrip. It's destroying house values. It's doing all this stuff. Perfect example is San Carlos, California. San Carlos, California, they built all this high rise at the end of the runway. They said, you have to sign a waiver. You understand this an airport right here. For 1 year, the maximum length of that agreement, day one after the year was up, they sued the airport. And this happened all over. Look at Santa Monica, California. Time and time again, when you build houses near airports, this happens. They close down. So even though today there's nothing talking about closures or anything like that, it will happen eventually. So that's all I got. Sorry, this isn't like a professional speech. Everyone else did so good. So thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, sir. Nobody else itchy? There we go. I do really appreciate the respectful manner. Having come from been in Washington, DC last week, we've seen what it looks like when people aren't civil to each other. And it's nice to come back home to Battleground and see it in person. So thank you again. Sir?
Good evening. My name is Bill Maddox. I live at 11621 Northeast 266th Street. That's Parkside Air Park. And I have a kind of a unique perspective. I'm not an airline pilot. However, I have been flying for 50 years. I learned how to fly on a grass strip 50 years ago. I've been a certified pilot for 45 years, flown all over the country. And in that time, I've run into many people from other countries who come to America to fly free. We have a very unique system of aviation in the United States. It's the only place you can fly like this. And they're becoming scarce. And we have a very unique situation here in Battleground where you've got a very active community of people that are learning how to fly. It's on the chart. So anybody who's headed in or out of Portland with a small airplane that has a problem can land there. And there's a diminishing number of these types of facilities around the country. So I would encourage council to seriously consider that there's always developers. And they're always looking at the open spaces that airports provide. Big ones, little ones. And the fact that a lot of the community wasn't aware of what was going on at Cedars North should be taken note of. So thank you for your time, and we'll see you at the airport.
Thanks, sir.
Good evening. My name is Neil Cahoon. I live in Fern Prairie, Washington, adjacent to the Little Camas Airport. And I do spend a lot of time flying in and out of Cedars North here. My understanding is the question before you is really about zoning and compatible versus incompatible land use. And it's my impression that while option one, the preferred option, is the most compatible with the residents, that option two is the least compatible with the long-term longevity of the airport. That if option two were enacted with the zoning change, that it would just put the nail in the coffin of the airport way sooner than I would like to see it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Savannah Burke. I am a resident. Sorry. My name is Savannah Burke. I'm a resident right off of the airstrip and am blessed enough to get to run that airstrip every day, get to fly out of it with my boyfriend, who's also a flight instructor. And I'm also getting into it as well. It's just, you guys have to experience it for yourself. There is nothing like it. And to lose that would to be losing value in Battleground. And truly, it's educational. It's a sight to see. It's well maintained. It's truly something that you can't find anywhere else. We're lucky enough to fly all over Washington, Oregon, all these places, and nothing compares to Cedars North. There's no grass strips like it. There's no community like it. I truly, truly think that zoning it to anything other than what it is would honestly be devaluing the community and how it is right now. It's just, like everyone says, come see it for yourself. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, 5-second rule coming up here pretty quick. All right, I'm not seeing anybody else step forward. No? Okay. So with that, seeing no further members of the public wishing to speak, I will now close the public hearing at 8:31 PM. No action will be taken on this item at tonight's council meeting. And I would suggest we take a 10-minute recess and give everybody a break. And we will reconvene at 8:41. Thank you. I figured they might not want to stay for that. Yeah. If you guys can take your conversations outside too, it really echoes in here. Thank you. It's not like it's raining. All right, I have 8:41, so we will reconvene. Do we have any communications yet presented to the council or submitted during regular or regarding business items, Madam Clerk? What's that? Right here. Just before the resolution. We're on to business. Did I skip something?
No, it's not on ours.
Okay.
Should just.
No communication regarding business items.
No, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you. So next up, we have Resolution 2402, Governance Coordination Manual Update. Deputy City Manager Robert?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This item should be familiar to the City Council. The resolution before you would implement a few changes to the government manual, specifically not holding the regularly scheduled first meeting in July to correspond generally with the 4th of July holiday, and the second meeting in December to correspond with Christmas, unless needed by the City Council. During the citizen communications portion of the City Council meeting, the 3-minute minutes per person speaking rule would be enforced, and also limiting citizen communications at 30 minutes total, unless those rules are suspended or the mayor allows additional time. The resolution also would eliminate the term limits for the mayor and deputy mayor, with re-election to occur every 2 years, and then to schedule an annual City Council retreat to occur the first Saturday of each February. In addition, while the City Council had previously discussed modifying dates and times of regular meetings, that is not part of this resolution. If City Council at some point in the future wants to have the conversation, we'd be happy to entertain that. With that, staff recommends the City Council consider and adopt the proposed changes to the governance manual as mentioned in the resolution. Thank you.
Yeah. Any questions or discussion? If not, I will accept the motion on this potentially most brought back item of the council history. Deputy Mayor Bowman.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to approve Resolution 2402, Governance Coordination Manual Update as presented.
Second. Second by Councilmember Overholzer. Any further discussion or questions? Uh-uh.
Not holding the first meeting in July, the second meeting in December, unless needed by the City Council. For citizen communications portion of the. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So that's only for the main citizen communications, not for public hearings or anything. Just the
Correct. You can-
first 30 minutes. Okay. Just need clarification. Thank you.
Any other clarifications needed? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And it carries unanimously. Moving on to administrative reports.
No administrative reports tonight, Mayor.
Okay, so it brings us on to council communications. Any council member have something to share for the good of the order? Oh, yeah, Alicia's not here. We do have, I don't know what time it is off the top of my head, the Memorial Day. 11? At a minimum, yes, please. I'm sorry, what? Yeah, well, we can't. Yeah. As many people will make it as they can. So it's a neat ceremony for those who have not been. We do have quite a few veterans show up for that. So looking forward to seeing the community at that event. It is, Alicia's putting it on quite a few social medias. So please share it, and we look forward to seeing you all there.
All right. I was debating on whether to
bring this up for discussion, but we do have our legal representation here. So Ken, I'm gonna hopefully get some answers from you. But last year I was sitting in the crowd and there was some questions brought about our proclamations and the way they're conducted and the way they're formatted. And legal came back at that time and had mentioned potentially a First Amendment issue. And that's one thing that I wanted to get more clarification. If you have any feedback on that, or if you can get back to us on that. I was curious about why it potentially was a First Amendment issue. And I want to make sure that, just get some more information on that. So that we might make some adjustments to make sure that we're operating correctly. And
Yeah, well, Councilmember, I'd be happy to follow up with you on that. I don't know the specifics of what brought that up from a city attorney point of view, what the specific question was that raised the First Amendment concern. In fact, I hesitate to even guess at it because if it's a matter of simply the city making proclamations, I can tell you that a municipality has First Amendment rights like any individual does. I suppose there could have been something about a viewpoint neutrality consideration. I just don't know. But Councilman, I'd be happy to follow up and get more details and get back to you. You bet.
Nothing else? Okay, well then, I took a break just for the first time, but anyway, so next meeting is Monday, June 3rd. There is a study session at 6 p.m. Regular meeting is at 7 p.m. And 8:47, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.